Several years ago, when my husband and co-minister, the Reverend Wayne Arneson, and I were on sabbatical, we visited churches all over the country, and we were studying best practices in worship, a trip that eventually led us to write a book called Worship That Works. And one of the churches we attended way back then was the Pentecostal church called Higher Dimension in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Anybody hear of it? Know this story? A couple of you do. Prior to our visit, it was one of the largest churches in the state, an average attendance of 6,000 people every Sunday and growing rapidly. At the head of the church was Bishop Pearson. He was a dynamic, powerful preacher, beloved protege of Oral Roberts, whose prominence extended way beyond Tulsa into the influential circles of Washington, D.C. But when we attended the church there were barely 100 people in this vast, modern church. And once Bishop Pearson started preaching, I saw people walking out during his sermon. Glad nobody's doing that right now. And what was going on, I wondered? Well, some of you may know this story because it's part of another All Souls church history, All Souls Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But what happened was that Bishop Pearson's Church of God in Christ and Pentecostal faith was very clear, had a very clear doctrine that hell was real, that non-Christians were going there unless they accepted the doctrine of Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. But Bishop Pearson had an epiphany after watching people suffering during the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. He doubted the existence of hell, and he came to believe that hell was created by human depravity and behavior. He denounced his faith's traditions in hell and embraced what he called the gospel of inclusion. And he would preach this gospel of inclusion, that we are saved not by a historical figure, not by a theological idea, but by God's love, and by the ways in which we as human beings strive to embody this love. And he realized, as did the minister of the All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Reverend Dr. Marlon Levenhar, that Bishop Pearson was preaching the same belief system that composes the second part of our very long name, Unitarian Universalism. The belief that human beings are not condemned to hell, but that God is love, however you interpret that word, and that love is at the center of our theology. That belief that love, not judgment, hellfire, damnation, should be the motivating force for our lives is profound, and it's one that our ancestors lost their homes, their livelihoods, and in some cases their lives for. So theologically and spiritually, Unitarian Universalism is steeped in the historical belief that no matter what we do, we are loved, not born in original sin, or depraved human beings in need of salvation from an angry, disappointed, distant God, but that we are whole and holy and worthy of love. So what does that mean in practice? It means that when I look at you and you did me wrong, or you hurt someone I love, or you broke something I cherished, I still have to see in you, and hope I can see in you, goodness. Maybe goodness that you can't even see in yourself. And I am compelled by faith, maybe not to like you, but to love you, and to hope and to pray to see the goodness in you that I wish to see in myself. I don't need to tell you this is not easy. Because when we are in the midst of conflict, it can feel impossible to see the glimmers of goodness in another human being. And I am talking about conflict. In this sermon, I'm not talking about what can be like unforgivable sins against human beings. So I have to tell you this story. I was talking to a Buddhist practitioner recently, and we were talking about our various spiritual practices. And this person said they recently put an image of our current president on their altar. And I was astonished, because the image of our current president is not one that I would put on my altar. And just telling you the truth, oftentimes I'm filled with such anger that I just couldn't imagine it. But this practitioner said, I need to learn how to not hate this person. And that image on my altar reminds me that that's my practice. And that admission made me realize how much more work, how much more spiritual practice I have to do. I'm not there yet, but because I profess this faith of ours, as a Unitarian Universalist, as a progressive Christian who is inspired by the life and ministry of Jesus, that loving all souls is a daily, demanding practice. And alone by myself, I can sure simmer in a stew of past regrets, old slights, real wounds, but fortunately, part of a community. We teach each other, not by doctrine, but by example, of how the various manifestations of love can feed the human soul. So this fall, I attended a concert by singer-songwriter Bruce Cockburn. Anybody know his work, his music? Some of you do. He's a Canadian singer-songwriter. And during the pandemic, he decided, or shortly after the pandemic, he decided he needed to start going back to church. So I went to church, and astonishingly enough, no one seemed to know who he was, or that he actually was a famous singer-songwriter. And they said, hey, Bruce, could you write some songs? Could you do some songs or play some music for us? And he said, sure, I could do that. So he played this new song, and it's called simply Orders. And this is what he wrote. The just, the merciful, the cruel, the stumbling, well-intentioned fool, the deft, the oaf, the witless pawn, the golden one life smiles upon. The squalling infant in mid-squall, the neighbors fighting down the hall. The list is long, as I recall. Our orders said to love them all. The cynic and the crooked priest, the woman wise, the sullen beast, the enemy outside the gate, the friend who leaves it all to fate, the drunk who tags the bathroom stall, the proud boy headed for a fall. The list is long, as I recall. Our order said to love them all. The pastor preaching shades of hate, the self-inflicting head of state, the black and blue, the starved for bread, the dread, the red, the better dead, the sweet, the vile, the tall, the small, the one who rises to the call. The list is long, as I recall. Our order said to love them all. The one who lets his demons win, the one we think we're better than, the challenge great, as I recall. Our order said to love them all. The second part of the sermon was to be delivered by Reverend Pamela. And since she couldn't be with us this morning, she did send in her homily. So I am reading it in her stead. This by Pamela Patton, Reverend Pamela Patton. That's our Universalist mandate. Our order said to love them all, love us all. It's our faith, and still it takes practice. How do we cultivate hearts and minds that really love them all? There are thousands of prayers and meditations from many religious traditions that support our Universalist view, and I benefit from many of them. But there's a practice I made up that fills me with joy. I imagine singing one of my favorite love songs to everyone I encounter on the sidewalk, in traffic, on the television. I imagine singing in full blast Stevie Wonder, "You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always be around." Can you hear it? Yeah? You are the apple of my eye. Forever you'll stay in my heart. Now, try closing your eyes and imagine how you would feel if you could sincerely sing your favorite love song to every person you encounter. I know. It's a thought experiment, so give yourself some freedom. Picture yourself on the train, at the grocery store, at work, in the elevator of your building, singing a love song for everyone. Feel it in your heart. Imagine you singing as a blessing for each person, to sense this unconditional love for all beings. It must be how saints feel, how God feels. You can open your eyes now if you wish. We are Universalists, and when we show up here in person or online, we may not be greeting each other with love songs, but we're blessing each other just by showing up. Every single one of you, no matter the reason you showed up on this day, is bringing your love to this community. It's an act of hope to have walked out of the door and made your way here, or to have organized your morning to turn on the screen to watch. I feel your hope. I feel your blessing. And when Kathleen invited us to greet each other this morning, we sensed it in each other. Even if this is your first day here, or your partner talked you into coming, or maybe your kid talked you into coming, the fact that you showed up is a blessing for all of us. So let's try another thought experiment, maybe a little easier for those of you disinclined to singing love songs. In her book, An Altar in the World, Barbara Brown Taylor writes this. She says, pronounce a silent blessing and pay attention to what happens in the air between you, all the other people, between you and all the other people. So let's take a moment to pronounce a silent blessing for everyone here, everyone who's watching us virtually. Just keep it simple. Bless you all. Just as simple. Bless you all. And as you start thinking about just who you are blessing, all those 200 and 300 people in the sanctuary online, you may find that you start to get specific, and a judge rises inside of you, suggesting that a blessing is best reserved for after the blessee has perhaps done some self-improvement. And you consider what that might mean for the person on their phone over that away, or that person who lacks manner over that away. And before that inner judge gets too mouthy, let's consider Taylor's advice. She writes, rightly or not, given the choice between a blessing and a curse, a blessing will do more to improve air quality. A blessing will have more power to transform the blessee, although transformation is not required. End quote. For 206 years, this community has shown up and blessed each other, thousands and thousands of human beings who have faith in our values, who care. Even if you think all the people who have sat in these pews since this sanctuary was constructed almost 200 years ago, the acts of compassion are uncountable. Here's just a few that happened this week. A group of friends collaborated to get a member to the hospital who was in need of urgent care. A member, an All Souls member on a Zoom program, isolated by her role as a caregiver, received messages of kindness as she shared with her colleagues. Last week, the boiler was down on the day that we had planned a staff retreat in our choir loft. Pamela texted a member at 7 a.m. to ask if she might be able to arrange for us to use the community room in her apartment building. By 7:45, all the arrangements had been made and had the room set up for us. several dozen young adults who showed up to connect with each other for our young adults bagel brunch last Sunday. Now, some of you are subtle, and when you see someone struggling who may not reach out for themselves, you pull me aside at coffee hour and you tell me, I don't really know him, but I saw him on the bus and he looked so sad. You show up. You bless one another. We need to keep showing up for each other, and we're expressing our love by showing up. We're practicing together to open our hearts to our Universalist values. Just look around for a minute. See who's here. Bless them with a smile, with your eyes. Bless you. I started coming to All Souls 30 years ago, before I was a minister. I sat alone in the back. I didn't know anyone. It was a tough time of my life. I cried a lot during those services, and I thought I hid it pretty well. But one of you leaned over the back of your pew and said, "It will pass." I thought, no, it won't. But you were right. It did pass. Thank you, and bless you.